Next is, this is much too high. Next is going to be Mikki Whitworth. I will find your logo. Why are they so artfully out of order? Aha. Mikki Whitworth is a disabled veteran and student pursuing a bachelor's degree in English with an emphasis on creative writing. She is a 3-time medalist in the VA Creative Art Festival's national competition. She serves on the editorial staff of Ellipses, Literature and Art, and occasionally writes for Q Salt Lake City's LGBT magazine. Masks of a Superhero is her first piece of fiction to be published. And the intro is, an urban metropolis is racked with crime after the disappearance of its hero, Captain Macho. But it turns out Captain Macho hasn't left at all, but he has changed. This story answers the question, what happens when a superhero self-actualizes? Mikki.
After she began her transition, Annie was amazed how completely different she felt. At first, she sat locked in her apartment drinking and wallowing in her loss. But eventually she realized she had to learn how to move from being Captain Macho into her new self. Now, after 6 months, she loved the woman in the mirror. She loved to look at herself, to see a woman looking back. Some days she would see Captain Macho in the mirror instead, blaming her for all of society's problems. On those days, she didn't love the new woman so much. But those days were slowly becoming more and more rare. Recently, she had been hired at a small boutique as a saleswoman, a huge change from her previous identity as a reporter for the Salt City Gazette. She loved the pretty clothes, and the women who came into her store didn't act as if they knew she had been a man at one time. She possessed a new confidence that even Captain Macho would have envied. How she smiled at strangers on the street, and didn't feel the need to watch for the next impending disaster. Captain Macho wore a mask, even out of costume. Annie didn't have to. There was no identity, no secret identity to hide. Donovan met her at the store to take her to lunch. He was tall and blonde. His blue eyes sparkled in the light as he saw how happy she was in her new life. "So how's your day been so far?" she asked. "Wonderful." He asked, sorry. "Wonderful. We got some new spring dresses in." "You sound like such a girl." They laughed at Donovan's quip. And it looks good on you. Don't you think excuse me. I don't think I've ever seen you this happy. I don't know if I've ever been this happy. Donovan smiled as he led his mother to a nearby cafe. "Want to sit outside?" "Splendid." The sun had emerged and warmed the air. Annie watched as the crowds moved past them on the sidewalk. She noticed a woman in stiletto heels saunter by in a short lacy skirt. She wondered idly if she could pull off a skirt like that. Suddenly a man in dark glasses, dirty hair, and an army fatigue coat walked up to the woman, the stiletto-wearing woman, and grabbed her purse. He shoved her to the ground and took off racing past Annie and Donovan. Both of them tensed as if to jump into action. Before they could react, however, a policeman rushed by them in a hot pursuit. Slowly, a little chagrined, they sank back into their seats. "They don't need us to protect them," Annie said. "Yeah, it looks like they figured out how to take care of themselves." "I miss it some days." "I don't. Then again, when I want to play hero, I can grab my bat and go." My little hoodlum," Annie sighed fondly. "Oh, you know it isn't like that." "Do I now?" She smiled. "You do," he winked. On that note, they ordered a plate of goat milk cheeses and Italian-made soft meats. Annie drank a bottle of sparkling water, and Donovan had a beer. She raised a disapproving eyebrow. "Mom," he said. Annie loved it when he called her that. I have the day off, and it's afternoon. Don't make it a habit of it. Your other job? You taught me well. Their lunches of vegetable lasagna were too hot to eat at first, as they lapsed into an awkward silence. They didn't always know what to talk about now that they no longer had to plan how to fight crime. Annie worries about the city and her own future. Annie's worries about the future and her own future lingered. Would she live out the rest of her life as a saleswoman? Was there something wrong with that? Something less heroic or noble? Didn't the city need its hero? More importantly, did that hero have to have her? Why had she even started saving people in the first place? 25 years earlier, Annie was known as Charles Wagner. He had started his first newspaper job in Salt City after finishing college. He liked the work, but it didn't feel like enough. What am I doing here? He would ask the man in the mirror. I need to be strong. During those first years, Charles went to work and returned home at night to dress in his favorite women's clothing, which was soft and silky. He tried to deny his abilities to go play dress up, as he called it, but he knew that his nightly wardrobe changes were something that couldn't be ignored. So he started dressing up in a different costume, the costume of a superhero, the costume of a strong, confident man who could always be counted on when things got tough. At the time, it was about the crime and discrimination in the city too. He needed to stand up for those who couldn't do it themselves. He believed the world could be a better place if there was some kind of example for people to follow. The cliche, with great power comes great responsibility, continued taunting Charles until he did something about it. In doing so, he chose the name Captain Macho. One morning he was driving down the mountain after a quiet picnic alone. He could have just flown up there and sat enjoying the view, the cooler air, but that seemed to be misusing his powers. Alone on the top of the mountain, he had dared to slip off his bulky sweatshirt and change into a lacy woman's top, letting the breeze caress his bare skin. It felt both refreshing and terrifying. It seemed like going out where someone could see him dressed like that was a braver act than anything his superhero alter ego did. Near the tightest curve on the mountain road, he heard the sound of squealing tires and a crash as a bright red Volkswagen van hit the median and bounced back across the road and into the guardrail. The van didn't stop. Charles slammed on his brakes and pulled off the road. He worried about the sound of a crying infant coming from the crash. Seeming to forget he could fly, he ran for the damaged guardrail and began the treacherous climb down the crumpled van 50 feet below. It looked like a ball of red foil, and a man and woman appeared to have been thrown through the windshield. They weren't breathing. He still heard the sound of a baby. But it was overwhelmed. But it was overwhelmed by the sound of approaching sirens. He pulled a door from the wreckage. In a baby seat in the middle of the van, untouched, screamed a baby boy. 2 paramedics arrived at the site. "Are you hurt?" the first medic asked. "I just came down to help. I think his parents are dead. We have to get you up to safety," the other medic said as he tried to help Charles with the baby. Charles didn't want to let him go. He knew he had to take care of the baby, but he also knew that he had to act like a brave man in shock and not a superhero. He didn't want the medics finding out his secret. The baby screamed as the medics escorted them back to the road. Charles clutched the car seat to his chest. He still could not let go of the baby. "We need to take you to the hospital for a more thorough examination, sir." One of the medics said to Charles. Charles' blood ran cold as he remembered the woman's secret, the top secreted under his sweatshirt. "We're fine," he insisted. "It's policy." "We're fine," he snapped, too roughly. The baby began to cry again. "Really? Well, I'll just take him home. Don't you think he's been through enough?" The medic looked at the two of them dubiously. Charles could feel his heart banging inside of his shirt. He knew he could just fly away if he wanted, use his powers, but the thought of using one secret to conceal another made his head hurt. From that day forward, he wore a mask. He didn't like the face in the mirror. He wanted things to change. So if a building was on fire, he would run into it. If a tornado appeared, he'd fly through the eye of the storm to break it up. The more dangerous the event, the more likely he would risk his life. Meanwhile, he worked to adopt a baby from the car accident. The protective feelings that were directed at the city were even stronger for the orphaned baby boy. The baby's dead parents had been raised in foster care together and married each other shortly after turning 18. Neither of them had any family. Charles learned all of this through his newspaper connections. "What about?" Charles paused. "Do you know his name?" "Donovan," the social worker explained. Investigators found several papers in the van, marriage certificate, past due notices from many sources, and a birth certificate. Charles considered this information. If Donovan didn't have any other family, and the state was going to just put him into foster care, Charles wanted to raise him. Thus began a long process of becoming a foster parent to gain custody of the baby. Donovan was nearly 2 when Charles finally brought the toddler home as his own. Donovan had learned to walk, but still didn't speak. Sometimes Charles thought it was better that way. If the baby couldn't talk, he couldn't ask Charles questions, and he wouldn't tell anyone of all of Captain Macho's masks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mikki.